Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Gather round, bookworms, because the time has come for a new episode of Rock and Read. Over the weekend, I did a poll asking people whether they wanted me to read the Ace Frehley book or the Geddy Lee book this week. The results were split right down the middle, even Steven 50-50. So, I broke the tie and picked Chapter 2 of No Regrets by Ace Frehley from Kiss. Chapter 2 is called Duckies. Here we go. The social divide in my neighborhood was fairly clear. Either you were a strong student with designs on college, or you weren't. My brother and sister fell into the first category. I fell into the second. Like a lot of kids drifting through school in the Bronx in the 1950s and early 60s, I sought friendship and camaraderie in a different circle, one populated by kids who favored leather jackets and jeans and greased-up pompadours. The transition occurred right around the time I went through puberty. Doesn't it always? Through much of elementary school, I had been an indifferent but harmless student, a kid who preferred sports to studying. I was taller than most of my friends, lanky and reasonably athletic, so most games came easily to me. I played shortstop in baseball, was co-captain of my school's basketball team, and won a handful of medals in track and field. About the only game I didn't like was football. I was skinny as a kid, without an ounce of extra flesh, good for playing basketball, and not a bad look for a guitar player, I might add. But not so great for football. One of the local cops talked me and some buddies into joining the Police Athletic League football team one year, and I can still remember the opening kickoff. The ball sailed right into my arms, and I took off down the sideline, figuring I had the speed and the moves to make a good return. Wrong. I never even saw the kid coming. He nailed me right in the chest and knocked the wind out of me. The ball went one way, my helmet went another. For several seconds I lay there, gasping. I had never been hit like that, and I couldn't believe how much it hurt. It was scary as... From that point on, I realized football wasn't for me. Truth is, much as I'd like to claim otherwise, I was not a particularly tough kid. That much was revealed not merely on the football field, but on the streets of the Bronx as well. I was a fun-loving kid who liked music and sports. I didn't fit neatly into the laid-back, studious group. Neither did I fit neatly into the gang scene. The tough guys were always testing other kids, pushing people around, seeing how far they could go before they trigger a response. I hated that feeling of apprehension, having to worry about walking to the candy store or coming home from school, not knowing who might be waiting around the next corner, smoking cigarettes, listening to doo-wop music, and waiting for an opportunity to kick the out of some little kid. Basically, for these guys, it was target practice. And on more than one occasion, I was the target. Admittedly, there were times I invited the attention, although that wasn't my intent. Like I said, I started early with girls, and when you were messing around with girls in my neighborhood, it was wise to exercise some caution and common sense. Specifically, only an idiot would chase girls who were attached in one way or another to one of the local gangs. Well, what the... For a smart kid, I could be a real idiot. Stubborn, too. I'm a Taurus, after all. Dominating the street scene in this part of the Bronx was the Ducky gang, a collection of kids ranging in age from the early teens to the mid-20s. Predominantly Irish, but with a sprinkling of Italian and German thrown in, The Duckies were a formidable group whose turf centered around the Twin Lakes, the duck pond section of the New York Botanical Garden. The Ducky boys were born around the time I was in elementary school, and their rise paralleled my adolescence. Although they died out in the mid-1970s, only to be immortalized in the movie The Wanderers, they were the kings of New York as far as I was concerned, and my fear of them was surpassed only by my desire to join their ranks. Not necessarily because I admired them or wanted to be part of a gang, but simply because I got tired of getting my butt kicked. The moment of clarity came one afternoon while walking home from school when I was about 12 or 13. I had been hanging out with this pretty girl for a few weeks, chasing her on weekends, looking for her at parties, occasionally stealing a little make-out time. Well, I should have known better. The girl had already been claimed by one of the Ducky boys, so protocol dictated that everyone else keep their distance. She was, for all practical purposes, untouchable, and I touched. So there I was, strolling through the park, minding my own business, when all of a sudden, this chick's boyfriend pops out from behind a tree and steps in front of me. I wasn't even sure how to react. The kid was a year or two older than me, a head taller, and probably 25 pounds heavier, a grown man by comparison. I froze for a moment and tried to weigh my options. Drop my school books and run like... Exercise a little diplomacy? I had always been pretty nimble when it came to talking my way out of trouble. Down the road, I'd learned the finer points of street fighting, the most important of which is this: always get off the first hit. But I was inexperienced and scared. Before I had a chance to react, the kid leaned forward and punched me in the face. I went down for the count. I don't know how long I was unconscious, probably only a few seconds, but when I came to, with my head aching and my vision blurred, the kid was standing over me. "Stay away from my girl," he said, "or I'll kill you." And then he went off, leaving me there alone, dizzy and disorientated, wondering whether any girl was worth so much trouble. But of course, they were. I've had a problem with females my entire life, and by that I mean women have always gotten me into trouble. More accurately, I've gotten myself into trouble because of women. It's been a recurring theme of self-destruction, right up there with drugs and alcohol. From the time I learned how to use it, I've too often led with my... and I've taken a lot of punishment as a result. There was, however, no reasoning with my adolescent mind, to say nothing of my adolescent hormones. Another guy would have gone home and to a Playboy magazine until he found a girl more suitable to his position in life. Not me. I like the wilder chicks for a very good reason. They put out. That left me with basically two choices. 1, find another girl. 2, join the Duckies. I chose option number 2. The Ducky gang didn't accept just anyone. You had to prove yourself worthy by being put through an initiation that lasted for several weeks. For me, that turned out to be a good thing. The lag between my first expression of interest and the point of no return, full-blown gang membership, was so vast that I had time to develop other, less risky interests, like playing the guitar. For a while, though, I really wanted to be a part of a gang and felt the need to be accepted. We were known unofficially as the Junior Duckies. I loved being part of the gang and enjoyed the security they offered, even if it included some of the same guys who had been making my life miserable a few years before. For the Junior Duckies, gang life was mostly about mischief and messing around with girls. Every weekend we'd get together at the duck pond and drink beer, get all riled up, and go looking for trouble. That didn't take much effort, as the Duckies weren't the only gang in town. We'd wander down to the Bronx River Parkway, near the edge of Ducky turf, and if we found anyone venturing over the line, we'd quickly engage in a rumble. These were less lethal in those days. We usually resorted to chains or baseball bats. For the junior Duckies, excitement came in the form of taking risks. We'd hitch rides on the backs of city buses and elevated trains, activities that usually caught the attention of the local cops and led to us being chased all over the neighborhood. Cheap thrills, I guess you'd say. When we weren't fighting or partying with the local chicks, in the winter, we'd sometimes throw snowballs at patrol cars just to get a reaction. They'd hit the lights and give chase, and we'd scatter in all directions. Stupid? Sure. But it was exciting and lots of fun. A couple times I got busted and ended up down at the 52nd precinct, where my parents would have to come and pick me up. After a while, my mom used to worry whenever I left the house. "Please be careful out there tonight, Paul," she'd say, wringing her hands. But she never tried to stop me, and neither did my father. By the time I was 14, I was basically spinning out of control. I didn't want to stay home or do my homework or even go to school for that matter. I just wanted to hang out with my friends and party. I wanted it so bad that I was willing to go through a junior Ducky initiation. Fighting was part of it, obviously. If the Duckies got in a fight, you were expected to be there and to stand up for your buddies. Maybe you'd be assigned a target, some poor kid at school who had pissed off one of the Duckies, and your job was to lay him out. I had been on the receiving end of those encounters. Now I was being asked to dole out the punishment. Cowards in any form were not welcome. Sometimes, to prove you had what it took, you were asked to do something dangerous or stupid, or in my case, both. "Come on, Paul, get your skinny butt out there." We were standing near an overpass above Webster Avenue on a Saturday night, and below, the weekend traffic was busy. Here was the moment of truth. If I wanted to be part of the gang, I'd have to show a willingness to put my life at risk. This time, I was on my own. "This is nuts," I said. And it was. They told me to crawl out on a catwalk under the bridge and then hang from a beam with my feet dangling over the highway. I guzzled a couple beers to boost my confidence, but I was still scared. I took a deep breath and got down on my hands and knees. I was so nervous I nearly pissed my pants, but my fear was outweighed by my need to be accepted. If I could just get through this insane ritual without dying, I'd finally be part of the toughest gang in my neighborhood. Then I'd have protection. No one would ever with me again. For that, believe it or not, I was willing to risk my life. A few moments later, I was hanging above the highway. I could hear my friends yelling and cheering, but I couldn't make out a word they were saying with the noise from the traffic below. I forced my eyes open and looked back to the edge of the bridge. They were waving me back in. I pulled my legs into my chest and crawled back to safety, where I was greeted with open arms. I was finally in! In the Bronx, they referred to it as beer muscles, a phenomenon in which an otherwise low-key, fun-loving guy gets drunk and suddenly becomes willing to fight with anyone. That was me. If I had 2 or 3 beers, I'd go up against anybody. Because basically, I had no fear. With each drink, the inhibitions faded, and so did any concern over repercussions. Maybe that's why people would back down from me. Well, that, and the fact that I had the Duckies on my side. I was tall and skinny, and not really great with my fists, but when I drank, I felt like a superhero. I'd fight anybody with almost no provocation. I won a lot of fights just because I refused to back down. People tend to think you're a little crazy when you're that quick to fire, and who wants to fight a crazy guy? Alcohol, mainly beer, made me a different person, and I kind of liked that person. He wasn't afraid of anything or anybody. Not only that, but he was smooth as silk when it came to dealing with girls. It all goes hand in hand. Women like guys who are confident, funny, cocky, a little bit dangerous. I was all of those things in a single package. And as my fascination with music intensified in the coming years, I discovered that while alcohol did not make me a better guitar player, it did make me a more outgoing performer. When I was younger, playing at school dances or church activities, I suffered from stage fright. But if I had a couple drinks, the nervousness melted away. I was Jimmy Page and Jimi Hendrix all rolled into one. I owned the room. Drinking was always part of what we did in the junior Duckies. Some of my friends were also into sniffing glue. It was readily available, the perfect cheap high for a kid. I did glue only a few times as a kid, and once as an adult. More on that later. And frankly found the trips to be either completely uneventful or nightmarish. The bad one happened behind a gas station near Frisch Field, named after the great ball player Frankie Frisch, a Bronx native, I'm proud to say. I huddled up with a couple buddies, both experienced huffers, and we snipped the cap off the tube of glue and went to work. Some of the details escape me, but I do remember an overwhelming feeling of paranoia and fear. I became convinced that I had died and gone to hell. I was completely detached from reality. To this day, it remains one of the most frightening experiences I've ever had, and that's saying something. For a while afterward, I was thoroughly anti-drug. I drink beer, of course, but that's about it. In fact, a couple years would pass before I'd even try smoking pot. By that time, I had begun hanging out with other musicians, guys who weren't part of my gang, or any other gang for that matter, more like hippies. All of a sudden, I started changing my hairstyle, out with the pompadour, in with the longer, shaggier look. I became fascinated with the British invasion, the Beatles and the Stones especially, and then I started gravitating toward other musicians who played the music I liked to play. Those guys, for the most part, weren't tough guys, but they were peace and love guys and rockers. And I had one foot in their world. If not for music, I'm sure I would have become a full-fledged gang member and ended up either dead or in jail. But music pulled me away from that. It literally saved my life. I started playing on weekends, rehearsing at night, and eventually the guys in the Ducky gang turned their backs on me. Can't blame them, really. How much rejection can you take? Hey, Paul, come on. We're going to break into a warehouse tonight. Sorry, man. Can't make it. Got a gig. It was a natural progression, with me going in one direction and them going in another. I started playing more, even making money from some of my shows, while they became involved in more serious and taking heavier drugs. Not that I didn't want to run with those guys as well, but hey, there's only so many hours in a day. Eventually, you have to make a choice. I chose the guitar. Or maybe the guitar chose me. At the age of 16, I was playing in some decent bands and getting progressively better gigs. At some point along the line, I decided that I didn't want to go to jail. I had been around enough police stations and holding cells, and I had met enough guys who had done serious time to know that I probably wouldn't have done real well in prison. I wasn't cut out for it. I wanted to play music. I wanted to be a rock star. So when the activities of the Ducky boys escalated, I pulled back. The early stuff had been fairly benign. I mean, we were hot-wiring cars and going on joyrides, but it wasn't like we were taking them to chop shops. I was lucky, too. I never got caught at anything that serious as a kid. I remember one day waking up with a hangover and realizing that the night before I had stolen a car and driven all over the Bronx before ditching it by the side of the road. That one would have been costly. Drunk driving, grand larceny, speeding, and whatever else they wanted to throw at me. Evidence to the contrary notwithstanding, I wasn't stupid. I started to see that some of my friends were taking ridiculous chances with their lives, probably because they didn't give a. They didn't see anything better down the road. Some of them didn't care if they lived or died. My friend Walter, for example, went away to juvenile hall when we were in our mid-teens. Shortly after he got out, he stabbed some guy in a bar fight. Did 5 years for that one in a state penitentiary. One of my closest friends, Tommy McCalden, died at Rikers Island Jail when he was 18 years old. Tommy's dad had been superintendent of my building when I was growing up, and we were in the junior Duckies together. We had drifted apart by the time he died, but I still remember being shaken by the news. I didn't want to go down that road. I wanted more out of life. I expected more. Well, that's the end of Chapter 2. Let me know what you thought of Chapter 2 in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.